What's going on, guys? Welcome to the OPSM podcast. We have Jesse Filanga with us, OPSM General Manager. And then we also, at the bottom of the screen, have Steve Cooke, who is now the Academy Director at Phoenix Rising. So talk to me about the vision of the Academy now at Phoenix.
Yeah, so, my official title is kind of Director of Soccer Development, so it encompasses a lot of different areas. And most of my work so far has been with the first team on the field every day, but also looking at players, bringing in players if we can, and if we can help players progress through the professional side, that's good. And then obviously a big part of the remit was developing a professional academy and making sure that we not only build from the first team, but we build young players in the Arizona area in particular, and maybe even a little bit further afield from that, and really try to look at that whole club philosophy, integrate the whole club from our youngest players, which are, we have a youth group of about 6,000 players, so 4, 5, 6 years old, and hopefully the dream is that one of them comes through and goes all the way through the ranks, makes the first team, and wins trophies at the first team level. So that's been a big focus, and obviously we've seen with recent news the last couple of months that's been a really heavy focus. So we're pretty proud of where we are, but we know also there's a long way to go in terms of developing the whole club.
Stephen, can you speak to us a bit about just joining the MLS Elite Player Development Platform, and what does that mean for a club like Phoenix, and also what is the grand vision for that program?
Yeah, first I think it's really exciting times, and I know maybe a month or 5 weeks ago or so, people were maybe nervously seeing some news with the US Soccer Development Academy going away and US Soccer deciding not to continue with that. Mm-hmm. But I think, as you saw, almost a couple of minutes later, MLS immediately released something saying they're going to have an MLS Elite Player platform. Mm-hmm. And really, I think they've done an outstanding job, and the leaders in that. And I think having professional clubs and the professional leagues, both MLS and USL, lead the charge. Mm-hmm. I think it's really important because obviously their aspirations for players are very high. Professional clubs are invested and committed to wanting to bring players through, not only because they want to play them in the first team, but they're also invested in maybe one day a player gets sold to Europe or things like that. But also, I think the soft place to fall for every player in a professional academy is hopefully they get to go to the college of their choice and then still make it back to being a professional player. So I think, we're very committed. We're very invested in making sure that we provide a great environment for the players. I think the new platform will really help that. I think it will be a little bit more soccer rather than administration. So I think that's going to be a key piece, that it's going to be led by soccer people. And for me, that's always a bright point. And I think, the league will grow and it will develop. And I think for the most part, at the beginning, not a lot will change too quickly. And I think, we're not inventing soccer players here. These are the same players playing in largely the same clubs, mm-hmm. who are hopefully going to progress now further with a better platform. But we at Phoenix Rising, we feel really excited. We're confident that we've got a great program in place, not just because of the new platform, but we always felt we had that, and we felt that we were always going to be doing the right thing. And again, continue to work on what we do well and how we can improve our players with our style of play, and how we teach our players, and the methodology, I think, is really important. And from our perspective, not a lot really changes in that regard. We just want to provide the best possible environment, the best possible culture for the players to grow in. Mm-hmm. And if that means they one day play for Phoenix Rising and win trophies at that level, that would be amazing.
Mm-hmm. Steve, I think I have a bit of a two-part question then. In terms of just changing the player pathway that exists right now in America, how much is this new platform going to change that? A lot of guys go to college before they go to they come back to they get drafted in MLS. A lot of guys spend time in college before they go into USL championship teams. And also the second question would be, in terms of improving the American player, there's a consensus, or there's an idea that they have to go to Europe at a young age. Is this platform to do that, or are we still just trying to usher them into college and hopefully get them back into the system?
Yeah, I think in answer to both of those questions, really, it's not a one size fits all. Every player is on their own individual pathway. Some kids are tiny and skinny at 16 years old, and some kids are fully grown at 16 years old. And I think in terms of player development, you've got to be really careful about making too many snap judgments at 13, 14, 15, 16 about whether a player is going to make it, because I've said it many times this last few months. If I had $1 for every kid I said was going to make it and then who didn't, or every kid who I said, listen, this kid's got no chance, and they end up becoming an absolute star, we'd all be very rich in player development, because I think kids develop, and I think our biggest focus is we don't know who the one player is. So we have to treat, in my opinion, all of them like they could be that one special player that could grow and develop into a World Cup superstar for the USA and win a World Cup for the US. That would be one of the dreams. Mm-hmm. So I think our job is to help them all improve, put great programs in place and not put too many ceilings on players, and also help guide them into the appropriate area. For some kids, as you rightly point out, that is going to college and playing. But I think one of the big things is, as soccer has grown in the USA and Canada, mm-hmm. as Major League Soccer over the last 25 years has grown and developed, as USL now develops exponentially. I mean, the growth in USL is so rapid that it's an amazing thing to be part of. I think we keep giving more and more opportunities for young players to come through. And that doesn't mean they have to go to Europe. I think if you look at a case, I'm watching the Bundesliga this morning, there's a couple of American players playing, and good for them. That was the pathway that they chose, and they're very good young players. But then when you look at a kid like Jordan Morris, who arguably on a given day is the best striker in the USA and could really be exciting at all levels, his pathway was to choose to stay in MLS. And some kids, again, I think it's all individual. I don't think there's a one size fits all. If you look at in the past, a player like Clint Dempsey didn't go to Europe at that young of an age, but still developed into a heck of a player on a world level and in a Premier League in England that was tough to play in. So I think it's all individual. A lot of it is timing. A lot of it is our positions available for players. But I also believe the American player that is currently becoming more of a commodity, becoming more recognized around the world as having not only the ability, but also, I think, importantly, the character to be able to go overseas and play. And I think that's exciting for those players. But make no mistake, I mean, good players come from all places. Good players come through on all sorts of different pathways. There isn't a way, but there is a definite progression for every player. And I think our one thing for certain for us as coaches and developers of talent is to make sure that we don't stand in their way and we don't put too many barriers up to their development. And hopefully that means they stay in our club and again, win us trophies. Mm-hmm. But if that's not the case, if there's a better pathway for that player, good luck to them. And you hope they all succeed, right? You want everybody to succeed. We know that that's a bit of a pipe dream, but every kid in the program, we want to be successful, whether it's on the field or off the field, or whatever their chosen path is. So I don't know if that really answered your question. I think maybe I've rambled on and I can't remember the second part,
No, it was perfect. You answered
it. Steve, talk to me about, obviously, being at Phoenix, culture, talking about the culture of the game. How important is it creating a culture at Phoenix, and also how are you guys going to go about, creating that type of environment for the players?
Well, first off, I came into the club, I think in November.
Yeah.
And obviously they're on the back of a heck of a 2019 season, and didn't win the ultimate trophy of the season, the USL Cup, but had the best record in USL ever. I think led by Rick Shantz and his coaching staff and support staff, they've done just an amazing job. And a big piece of it is the culture. And I think if we're not careful, that word can become a bit of a buzzword, and it's a bit of a throwaway, we're all developing a great culture. Well, it's more about not only how you believe the culture should be. So we've all got core values, we've all got principles of behavior and how we believe we should treat each other. But it's also about living them every single day. Yeah. And what I can tell you from being at Phoenix is, from ownership, who have been nothing but exemplary, not just in our region, but all over the nation. I think our ownership group is the envy of many, and they really are an outstanding group. and then through Rick Shantz, through the coaching staff, all the way down the club. Everybody's nose is pointed in the same direction, and we live the culture every day. So we live our core values every day. And when people maybe veer a little bit, we bring them back into line. And I can say this to you about the players. I've been so impressed with the playing staff and their commitment to each other and their commitment to the club and the community. And I can tell you, I feel really fortunate to be part of the club. I feel really fortunate to have been offered a position in such a good club. Mm-hmm. And not just a club today that we think is really good, but I think we've got a long way to go, and we have a lot of progression we can still make as a club. And, you know, irrespective of the league we're in, whether that is USL or MLS or anything else that comes along, mm-hmm. I think we have a great club, and I think it's one that not only is good today, but we can also make more strides. And with the backing of ownership and the leadership that we have in the club, I think we're on a great course, you know. And you know, again, I just feel really fortunate to be part of it in a small way, you know. And well, I guess some days it's a bigger way and some days it's a tiny way, you know. But I feel really, really fortunate to be here in not only a great club, but a great place as well.
I want to talk about your coaching career. So talk to me about going back, I believe in England, you started studying as a football coach at a young age, I believe at the age of 16. What influenced you in wanting to be a football coach?
I get asked this question quite a bit, and I don't really have an answer because I guess the short answer is that at that young age I was playing, obviously, and enjoying playing. And I remember actually it was about my 10th birthday, and my dad bought me this book, and I think it was Charles Hughes was the guy who wrote the book, Soccer Tactics and Skills or something. And I never read it. I put it down and I thought, you know, what the heck is my dad buying me a book for my birthday, for Christmas, you know. And like all kids, I ran out the house with something else and didn't even look at it. Well, 6 years later, my dad enrolled me on what was the FA Preliminary Coaching Award, which is now kind of a UEFA B course. And I went on the course. There were 5 other players, senior players from Sheffield Wednesday who were stars in my eyes. And I went on the course and I had a great time and did it. And I actually started, even at that age, helping out, coaching a few kids in schools and things like that, because not for any other reason than I enjoyed it. There was no money involved. It was just a pure, I enjoyed it, and that was it. And, you know, obviously, as players, you all want to be the best you can be, and you want to earn millions of dollars, and everyone has that dream of being a World Cup star. I wasn't good enough. So, and as you know, in England especially, but in Europe in general, it's a pretty harsh environment for a young player. And they like I said to you, they do make the cutoffs at all sorts of ages. Yeah. And by the age of 22, I was asked back to Sheffield Wednesday to coach in the academy. And Clive Baker, who is a mentor of mine and was a great friend of mine, gave me a position in the academy. And I really just kind of ran with it and did more work than I was ever paid for. It was never about that for me. And I went to the training ground every day and worked hard and spent a lot longer there than most people. I had nothing else to do. It wasn't like I was trying to get a second job or do anything like that. I just enjoyed it. And at the time, we had some really, really good young players. We were in the Premier League with our older players, and you know, from following a bit of French football, you'll remember Chris Waddle, who came to us in 1993, and it was that kind of group where for 6 years I was there. We competed in the Premier League very well. We went to cup finals a couple of times, played in Europe, and at the same time, the young players were doing really, really well on a national level and beating some of the big clubs around the globe. And we brought a lot of players through, and they played for the national teams, and it was just an incredible learning environment. But I think the biggest piece of it was that I was immediately, at such a young, impressionable age, I was surrounded by really, really great people who were good mentors and worked hard, and very few egos. And we were playing at a level that people could have got a few big heads and nobody really did. And we just had a great time doing it. It was very successful. And again, I look back on those years incredibly fondly, because most young people, most young coaches don't get the opportunity that I was given at that age. And I'm forever grateful for the start I had in coaching at Sheffield Wednesday.
So then talk to me about the transition that you made. How did that come about from you going from England to America?
Yeah, well, I had a friend in Arizona, as it happens. And, I came out to visit once and really liked the place, but it was the right time of year. It was kind of Christmas time. So it was beautiful weather and fantastic. So I never came in the summer. Otherwise, I might not have even bothered. Yeah, exactly. And a couple of years later, I was offered this position in 1996, and I was at Sheffield Wednesday, and again we were doing really, really well. We were on the cusp of winning trophies and really doing well. And but I was intrigued by this idea of living in America, and intrigued by having another challenge and a different challenge, learning more, not only about soccer but about another culture. And I think, North America is a bit of a dream for many people, and it certainly, for me, seemed like a good adventure. Yeah. I asked my granddad, who basically lived in the same square mile of land all his life, was a coal miner for 48 years. And surprisingly, he said, give it a go. You never know what can happen, and go for it, kind of thing. I went to ask my dad, who was a steel worker. And he just said the same thing, and both of them said if I fancied going back home and living there, if it didn't work out, I could go back home and no problem, and they'd help me out by letting me live in their houses, and so that was easy. And when I went to Clive Baker, again, who really helped me along in my career, and I trusted, I went to him, and I thought he was maybe going to blow his lid, but he was also a coach who'd coached in Norway, been in Canada, and had travelled around the world doing a little bit of coaching, even though he was at Sheffield Wednesday for a long, long time. And he just said, what, give it a go. You'll never look back. You won't regret it. He said, and look, he said, whenever you want to come back, you can have your job back. So because of that, I kind of had it was a bit of a no-brainer. I thought I was maybe coming out for 6 months to have a little adventure, and enjoy life off the field as much as on it. And then, gradually over time, you miss home a little bit less, and you suddenly develop a life. I had a good opportunity to go back home after being in America for about 9 months to go work at Fulham. And I thought I was going to do it, but when I was on the plane back over to Arizona, I thought for sure I was going to maybe give it a go, but I for some reason I stayed and got dragged into this life and loved it, and I knew that there was a bigger challenge ahead, and I felt that I'd not completed my journey in America. I felt like there was more to gain and go for. So I from that moment on, I was determined, and I said, I'm never going to go back to England unless it's an amazing role. So I decided I was going to give everything I had to building a life and a career here, and that's 23 years ago now. So far so good. I'm still employed.
Yeah, it's definitely crazy how life works. Between MLS and USL players, is there a gap, and what kind of gap does exist, if any? Can you describe that for us?
Yeah, good question. Obviously, there is a gap because the typical club salary in USL is not as high as the typical salary in Major League Soccer. We obviously, I think in pre-season, we played 5 MLS teams. And so in pre-season this year, I think we won 4 of those games or 3 of those games and tied one, something like that. And so we felt that we are very competitive with those teams. I think at the top end of Major League Soccer, when you look at the top half dozen, 8, 10, 12 players on a roster, they're obviously very, very good players. But I would imagine that every single good quality USL team can compete for sure with the bottom half of an MLS roster. If that was a league where we played against the bottom halves of those rosters, I think we do extremely well, but there is a bit of a gap, and I think the gap is often, individual players, some because maybe athletically not quite as gifted, or some because maybe technically, or the biggest thing I think is quick decisions. Can they make the quick decisions that players like, if you look in the past at a Robbie Keane or a Giovinco or an Almiron or, Joseph Martinez, these kinds of players who are really at the top end of Major League Soccer, they have a lot of everything. You know, they're athletically fantastic. They make great decisions. Technically, they can handle the game. And I think the biggest thing is psychologically, they have that real desire to compete. But I'll tell you, USL is a standard that is extremely good.
Yeah.
I think on a world level, I think in America, we don't give ourselves enough credit. I think that the soccer landscape in the USA and Canada is fantastic. I think there are so many good players. There are some great coaches doing great work and really good clubs. The fan base is growing and getting more and more excited. So I don't think we give ourselves enough credit in this country of being excellent at what we do. And we constantly refer to Europe as being the place, when in reality, there's you know, I've been all over Europe, and there's some pretty average soccer getting played all over parts of Europe as well. So
yeah,
I can assure you that in our Major League Soccer, if that's our Division 1 and our Division 2 in USL, I think could compete with any league in the world. Obviously, the top 5 leagues, when you look at the top 2 or 3 clubs, they're world stars. You know, they're absolute world stars, and there is a gap in those leagues to then maybe teams 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So, but I can tell you, I think Major League Soccer, USL, growing standard, financially doing really, really well. And I just believe that soccer in this country is something that is not only on the rise now, but in the next 10 years, if the growth continues, I mean, we will be extremely good. And I would love it if people gave us in America a little bit more credit for doing some exceptional work, which is what I think is going on across the board.
As well. That kind of goes into my next question. On the grand scale of things, you know, football development all around the world is different. And you see youth teams at the Youth World Cups, they compete well. Then at certain ages, let's say the under 20s or at the senior levels, that completely drops off, whether that be the Ghanas, the Nigerias, some of the even America and some of the strongest sides around the world. In terms of just the gap in development that, you know, seems to be apparent in world football between the top European teams and the rest of the world, why is that? Can you speak on that a little bit and give us a bit of information?
Yeah, I think you're not too wrong. Is that the youngest ages, I think up to about 17 or 18, 19, we do a great job, and you know, most countries in the world. But then there is that period where I think in some of the more maybe established, sophisticated leagues, their development from 19 to 23 seems to be a little bit more accelerated. And this is not me saying, well, college, you know, we shouldn't go to college, because I really believe in the college system. I just think that the kids over there that get kept on at 18, 19, they have that goal and that dream to stick with it and go for it a little bit more. And I do believe that there is that little bit of a gap from our kind of 17-year-old or so, 18-year-old, when they're coming to the end of their youth career. And then, you know, football, the first team coach has got to win the games. That's the way this works. And therefore the risk is a little bit too much if you think a young kid might not be ready, or maybe, you know, we're fighting relegation, or we're just near the bottom of the league, or we want to make the playoffs. Sometimes that risk of playing a player can be a little bit daunting. And, you know, there are some exceptional young players that get lost in that shuffle. And that's not right or wrong. That is just the way it works. What I would say to any young player is they have to fight really hard in those years to force their way into a team. They have to be determined. They have to perform better than the current players in the first team, not just expect to get in because they turned 18 and suddenly felt they were a professional player. Every professional player should work hard every single day to push somebody out of the team. And if they go in, but make no mistake, I mean, Rick Shantz, as our head coach, wants to win every single game, and our team wants to win every single game. And if Rick believed a 16-year-old would go in and win as a league title, the young man would play. That's the way it works at that level. I think every player needs to be determined. And also, we have to look at it and say, in our club, for example, is there a young player that could be exposed gradually, and we could bring them through slowly and maybe give that young player an opportunity. And I think this is the balancing act that we face, because obviously at the top level you want to win the games, and also you want to develop players. And it's not a one size fits all for every club. Every club is different. And you know, we just spoke about Toulouse, where their model is about bringing young players through and hopefully playing in the first team and selling them on. And that is not only their playing model, but their business model. And every club is a little bit different in that. If you're Real Madrid, you can buy a lot of players, you know, so maybe development is a bit less of an emphasis for them. But even there, they develop some phenomenal players, maybe for other clubs, you know, that they do a great job of developing players for other clubs. So again, there isn't one size fits all, but I think in answer to your question, in the USA, we have to be still patient. I think we have to keep doing a great job with our players, maybe exposing young players to better opportunities at a younger age. And I think also we're also faced with the challenge where getting an education and getting a degree is still critically important for a lot of families, and seems to be the kind of family pathway. You know, if you don't have a degree, you're almost seen as a second citizen in some industries, and I don't really agree with that, because I think life experience is just as important, if not more important. But still, we have the pull of college, not just because of the soccer, but because that may get you the degree and it gives you that soft place to fall. Whereas, you know, in the world football, you don't have too many soft places to fall sometimes. In fact, it's sometimes rock hard, you know. So I think that's one of the cultural differences about America, is we have a lot of soft places to fall for young players. College being a great example, whereas in many places, and you mentioned Africa, you mentioned Europe, you mentioned South America, there just aren't that many soft places to fall for a player who drops out the game at 16, 18, 19, 20, you know.
That's fair.
Steve, time is okay?
Yeah.
Listen, I don't know about you, but I have nowhere to go.
There's a football match to start again in about 30 minutes.
Exactly. Yeah, you disturbed my watching Red Bull Leipzig and Freiburg this morning. I was enjoying the game.
Oh gosh, I have one question, Gordon, if I can go ahead. So again, this is about the football development in America. You know, the lack of vertical integration. You know, how does that affect a club like Phoenix Rising? Especially, how does that affect maybe a USL? Because, you know, you guys are in a unique position. You're a big, let's say, a relatively small team right now in a big market with the possibility to become something exceptional. There's other markets like that in America that are public, that are maybe in the USL. So, you know, how does that affect the football development of the league, the USL, and also just in the grand scheme of things, if you guys do have to jump, let's say, to another division?
Yeah, I'm going to answer this in a different way than possibly you've asked the question, because I think you said something really, really important, which is vertical integration. And so in our club, one of the big reasons I'm here is to help with that vertical integration from our club standpoint. So can we, oftentimes I think we categorize people as being in U10, U11, U12, U13, rather than it be that fluid spectrum. And then certainly when you change to being 18 into a reserve team, or going from being a young player into being a professional player, sometimes those are not bridged at all, and they're just big gaps. And one of my roles is to kind of try to bridge those gaps for as many players and as many parts of our club and programs as we possibly can, so that players don't fall through those gaps and then get lost to not only us, but get lost to the whole system. And I think the same would apply, and I think this is what you're really asking about, the vertical integration between the leagues. And I understand what you're saying. There is no promotion relegation in this country to speak of at the moment. I think that is probably a wise choice based on business. And again, when you ask somebody to pay a $300 million or so franchise fee to become a Major League Soccer club, and they invest that kind of money, and they build a 25,000 seat stadium downtown, and they you know, get all the sponsor deals going, and they think they're on a great pathway. Well, if you look back at a club like Cincinnati last year, who've grown exponentially the last few years, Minnesota not too long ago, well, that first year they probably would have been relegated, and that's a heck of a $500-600 million investment to then lose the vast majority of that value within a year, which, as you know, the first year of professional football at any level is very difficult, because you're learning just how to grow the club. So I think that's one of the promotion relegation things. However, our club, you know, we have links with Major League Soccer clubs, and so there is some learning pathways. Players can be pushed into Major League Soccer. But I do understand your question is that there are some gaps there. I think as Phoenix Rising, all we can do is do the best possible job we can of building a club, building a style of play, building our methodology, building our business as well, I think, which is really important. So that whenever we feel the time is right, or when ownership want to make that kind of investment, the club is ready, and the club is already a top level club, you know, one of the best clubs in the country, irrespective of the league we currently compete in. And I think this is the challenge for us here. Can we build a top club, you know, that would be one of the envies of people around the world, and certainly in North America? And then can we continue with that development if ever we and owners decide that Major League Soccer is where they'd like to compete? But again, that takes not only a big investment, but standards constantly need to be raised. We need to always do a great job throughout the club if that is to happen. And part of it starts with youth development. You know, you can't grow a club overnight. And I think part of that pathway that we're trying to build is to build a club that is not only very good now, but is sustainable business and soccer over many, many years.
I have one last question.
Go ahead, Jesse. Keep going.
Lagos Kunga.
Yes.
Tell me about Lagos. How's he playing? How's he adapted moving over to you guys? He's a friend of mine a little bit, so I gotta ask.
No, Lagos is a wonderful young man. He's you know, one thing that is noticeable about Lagos is every single day he comes with a big smile on his face, and he's a player who loves the game, and he's even doing a little bit of coaching on the side, I think, as well. He's a player with incredible talents. He's got pace to burn. There are some things he obviously needs to learn, but I think he's only 21 is Lagos now, so he's got a long way to go. And again, he's a young player with a very, very bright future. I think if he continues to dedicate himself every single day to the small details about the game and learn some things with decision making, maybe use that pace by slowing it down a little bit sometimes in the final areas from a technical standpoint. But he's been a great addition. I mean, he really has and he's obviously is an Atlanta United player that we were able to bring on loan through the deal with Adam John. When Adam John went over there, we were able then to bring Lagos in on loan as well. And he's just been a really great addition. Obviously, he's left-footed, so that helps in so many different ways. I think he's relatively fluid as a player. He can play on the left, the right. He can play through the middle. And, you know, when he made his league debut for us, coming on as a sub in the first game, he scored a goal. So he's 1 for 1 at the moment. I think his ratio is 1 goal every 10 minutes or so far. So in answer to your question, he's doing extremely well on the field. But the biggest piece of him is that he's a really, really good human being who's enthusiastic and a joy to be around every single day. And I know the players love him and the coaching staff too. So we feel very fortunate to be able to have him. And thank you to Atlanta United for that.
Very good. Thank you, Steve.
Steve, this leads into my next question. From the youth to the first team, when you're recruiting players, what are the character traits or what are the things that you look for when you're building a team on all aspects?
Yeah, I think every club's a little bit different. And, you know, we're constantly getting sent players. We're always looking for players who fit the mold for the club because, you know, players leave because they get sold or they want to go to play at a higher level. We have young players coming through who might be able to make the team. But I think we all have our player profiles, for positional profiles. We all have our style of play and the way that we want the game to look and feel for our group. But then every single player that we look at, and I think every club I've been at and every person I speak to will always then, even when they look at a player and go, wow, this player's a good player, they're going to fit perfectly from a playing style. They're going to just be a really good player and the money's right and we can afford the player and they're going to fit in perfectly. We all ask the same thing. What is his character like? And every single coach and every scout and every club that I've been with and been around will ask the same question. Is he a good person? Does he train hard every day? Will he be a great teammate? When the chips are down and adversity is hitting, will this player help the group to get through it, or will they bring us down and blame and look to find excuses? And I think one of the big things here at Phoenix Rising, we have a full group of players who, when we ask the question, is this person a good character person? The answer is invariably yes. And everyone has their moments. Coaches, players, everybody has their moments where we're not necessarily at our best, or we don't feel like it on a certain day, or we make a mistake. But the best character people are the ones who can have those days, go home and reflect, recognize that they were off the mark, and then they fix it the next day and the next day and the next day. And I think we're really fortunate to have that. But in answer to your question, we all look for different traits as players, from players. And we might want a number 9 who can hold the ball up well, and somebody else might want a number 9 who can spin and get in behind with real pace. Those pieces are only relevant if the person is a great character person. And I think the players who have the longest careers at a good level and stick in clubs for a long period of time invariably are people that everyone would say, wow, what a great guy, what a great person to be around, and what a great teammate.
Awesome.
Thank you, Steve.
That's amazing.
Question and answer?
Sorry, just?
Question and answer time? Or?
Yes, question and answer time. So in closing right now, so what we're going to do is we're going to ask you a few questions. We're going to quiz you. So basically, if you were to create a starting 11, right, you have to pick one of these players that we're about to present you. All right?
Yeah.
So I guess our first question is, who would you have in the midfield? Paul Scholes, Gerrard, or Lampard?
Oh, man. All three. That would be a great midfield. I think
it didn't work for England.
Man, it didn't work for England, and I'm constantly wondering why. I think you'd have to go with Paul Scholes because of his incredible ability, passing ability. I mean, probably of his era, one of the top players in the world. And I think when you hear about players who speak about Scholes, they would all tell you what a player, But it's hard to ignore the running ability and goals of Lampard. Steven Gerrard has always been somebody who makes his team better and was a phenomenal player. All three outstanding players. But if you're forcing me, I've got to say Scholes.
Okay, next question. Xavi or Iniesta?
Oh, both. I mean... I'd probably go Iniesta.
Iniesta? Okay.
Probably Iniesta. And I have no idea why, because they're both so good and so clever and make that team tick. And if you look at, they didn't always get the limelight of some of the, the Messis of the world or the goals. But man, that team, especially with Busquets behind, I mean, you look at them and go, almost a perfect midfield. When you look at that, almost a perfect midfield. And again, you're giving me some terrible choices here. This is like choosing between chocolate and ice cream. I mean, they're both great.
In terms of managing the side, Pep Guardiola or Zinedine Zidane?
I think you'd go with Pep, right? Just because of the longevity in the game and has now done it in not only a few different clubs, but in a few different countries. So you look at that and go, wait a minute, special person, special manager. And then Zidane, how do you ignore the fact that 3 Champions Leagues, right, in a row? I mean,
yeah.
And he leaves, and then they get him back because they're not quite happy enough, I was fortunate to, as I mentioned earlier, when I went on the French course, to go to Real Madrid for about 10 days. And on that course, Zinedine Zidane was there actually doing the same course through the French Federation that I was on, and working with some young players at Real Madrid. And, what a player he was, by the way. I mean, I'm glad you didn't throw him into the mix of being in that midfield with those other 5 guys, because that would have been. I may change my mind then and go with Zidane. But I think Pep Guardiola's career speaks for itself at the moment. When you can win big trophies in Spain and then go do it in Germany and then go do it in the English Premier League, I mean, my goodness, there won't be many people come along who can do that.
Yeah, I guess. And then my last question, Steve, is Michael Owen or Alan Shearer?
I'm gonna, I remember actually working with England schools, and Michael Owen was a 15-year-old. Mm-hmm. And I've never seen a more explosive young player as Michael Owen. When he was 15, 16, 17, 18 coming through, this young man was exceptional. And I think my answer would go like this. If he had hamstrings that could have held up, Michael Owen would have been one of the best of all time, I think. If he physically could have got through it, he would have been comfortably one of the best goal scorers of all time. And I think when he went, to Real Madrid, you would have said, "Whoa, he's on the cusp of something big." Unfortunately, got cut short by injuries. So because of that, I'm going to go with Shearer, because he just did it for so long at such a great level. What a great goal scorer, and in different ways as well. Could really ignite his team and scored big goals in big moments. And you all remember him running away, having scored a goal with his arm raised in the air. It happened so often, it almost became a joke,
Yeah.
And Peter Ramage will be pleased, because he's a big Newcastle guy here, and I know he's a good friend of Alan Shearer. So I'm going to go with Shearer, but let me tell you, only because of a couple of hamstrings,
Steve, I got to ask this. This is probably a no-brainer, but Sheffield Wednesday, United.
It's not even close. I mean,
that question, eh?
Well, people always ask me who's my Premier League team, and I always say Sheffield Wednesday. Even though we're not there right now. I was lucky enough to grow up not too far from the ground and go there as a kid, and go back and coach there as well a little bit later. Spent great years. I've actually been on the phone with a couple of the old guys from there, and they're rerunning the videos from that era at the moment, like every club in the world is doing. They're rerunning old games, and man, this last month I've had so many great memories from there. And hate's a strong word, and I don't use it very often. But if I did, it would be reserved for Sheffield United some days, But over the time, I've had a lot of good friends at Sheffield United as well, and that city, there's a big rivalry. When you have two big teams in a city like that, there's a big rivalry, and this is going to really, really kill me to say it. I think what Sheffield United have done in the last few years has been incredible, and the way they play, the way they approach the game, from ownership through management and all the way through the players, they are outstanding. And for them to be doing what they're doing in the Premier League at the moment is nothing short of remarkable. And again, it kills me to say this, but right now you'd look at Sheffield United as been a wonderful football club with a great model for bringing players through and from winning at the top level. But my heart will always rule my head and tell you that Sheffield Wednesday are the best team in the world.
Yeah, you guys will be challenging for Champions League spots one day.
Yeah, exactly. We'll be back. Listen, we'll be back there before long, and they'll be back down. So don't worry about that.
Awesome. I appreciate you taking the time, Steve. And this was an awesome podcast. I really do appreciate you taking the time.